morning, NCCP. I'm Pastor Melissa Rudolph, and this is NCCP Anywhere. And we truly are anywhere. As you're watching this, if it happens to be Sunday morning, our team is on a plane heading toward Malawi for our first adventure there. But today, Pastor John and I happen to be in Chicago Midway Airport. And if you look around in the airport here on this busy morning, we see a lot of people who might consider themselves influencers, doing travel vlogs, chronicling every step of the journey that they're taking. But the interesting thing is, when we go back into the history of who we are as Methodists, that kind of social influence is part of our DNA, because it was the Circuit Riders who set out on horseback to spread scriptural holiness throughout the land. And it was that fervor where they would go and ride through rain and snow and wind, heat, whatever they were facing, to be able to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is what formed all of our communities of faith that are now connected, not only in the United States, but globally. So this month, we're going to be looking at some of the stories of those early circuit riders and people who were charged with giving hospitality to them. We're going to think about the things that they carried, and we're going to weave that together with the sayings of Jesus Christ in the Gospel of John, telling us all about who he is, as he says, I am. And this week we're going to start with I am the light of the world. So as we go forward into this series, I pray that you just are opened up to all the possibilities of the ways that you can be an influencer on those around you as you invite them to know the Christ of transformation. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Melissa. And yes, thanks to modern transportation, I'm back here in the physical parish here in Maryland. It was about a 30-hour trip that we took out to Chicago, first by plane and then by car to Mount Carroll, Illinois, to see Annika in Bright Star, a musical written by Steve Martin, of all people, at Timberlake Playhouse. And we had a magnificent time. But because of modern travel, we could go out and back in a day, basically, and be here for church here on this Sunday morning and for NCCP Anywhere, the week of August the 6th. We welcome you. I am Pastor John Rudolph. We welcome you wherever you're viewing in the world this day. Pastor Melissa has already jumped on another plane with Pam Lalji and Catherine and Jamie Turner as they go visit our brothers and sisters in Christ in Malawi, which is in Africa. We have partnered with your help and with your generosity. We have built a church, a parsonage, and basketball courts there, and they're going to do a mission of goodwill and relationship building and check on the progress there. So keep the team in your prayers. We are talking a little bit about traveling itinerant circuit riders to kind of get us to think about what it means to influence people in the name of Jesus the Christ. And nobody did it better than our original circuit riders in the 18th and 19th century in terms of the way the Methodist Church was able to reach people in every nook and cranny of this beautiful country. We were able to fly into Chicago and rent a car, and then we drove out 2.5 hours northwest of Chicago to Timberlake Playhouse, where Annika was performing. And we saw some beautiful farmland, which we're used to around here in these parts still today. But what was a little bit different is how flat everything was for about 2 hours of that drive. When we got into Carroll County, Illinois, it was much more like Carroll and Baltimore County, Maryland here, which we're used to. But for a while there, it was just so flat and everything was so spread out. We kind of thought about what circuit riders must have went through in the different places of our country, West, Midwest, North, South, East, Mid-Atlantic, and how they had to deal not only with meeting new people and different cultures, but also geography and topography. And certainly they didn't have planes, trains, and automobiles. They had to do it by horseback. You know, one of those amazing guys that really had an influence and an impact in the New World here was Francis Asbury. I'm sure you haven't gone too far in your travels without seeing an Asbury United Methodist Church. So you at least have seen that name somewhere. Pastor Melissa and I were married in Asbury United Methodist in Charlestown, West Virginia, her home church, where she was baptized and again married. But Francis Asbury rode his horse around these parts and up and down the East Coast, really for over 300,000 miles by horseback. And it's just an incredible way to travel and deal with the elements and the fatigue and the soreness. If you've ever ridden a horse maybe for a mile or two, which I have, you know that, I'm sure you get used to it, but not for 300,000 miles. And so, part of that is, at one point he was so tired of traveling, they would get him up on his horse and they would tie him to the horse so he wouldn't fall off when he fell asleep as he was going from one place to another. But that's how they did it. And so the life of a circuit rider certainly was fulfilling in terms of living out their call to preach the good news. But man, it was daunting and dangerous and really a tough way to go about it compared to the luxuries that we have today. In fact, most of those itinerant preachers did not last very long, either literally or they just got worn out and had to go on and do something else to live out their call. But Francis Asbury did it till he died, basically. And his impact here in America was incredible. He was a pivotal figure in the early Methodist movement in America. His methods, his impact, really speak for themselves. By the time he was finished, there were over 4,000 churches that were started and staffed and put together. And then the other part of that is by the time he passed, 214,000 members. So almost 250,000 members of the Methodist Church. And so it went from 0 to 215 in his lifetime in terms of his work on the horse. And of course there were others, and he became the first bishop, and so he began to ordain and send out other itinerant preachers as well. But he showed them the way, and he did it until he died. And what an impact and influence he made in each and every farmhouse and each and every town that he visited. And so we're thinking about circuit riders this month as a way to think about, how it is that we too can make an influence on others. And there's no bigger way that we can make an influence than sharing the life of Christ and how Christ has impacted our own lives with others. We think a little bit about what influencers are today, and if you just watched the news over the weekend, you heard the term influencer because of what happened in New York City. Speaking of Annika, as she watches the news, because she lives in New York City full time, and her heart breaks every time she hears bad news from New York City. Well, there was some bad news in New York City this weekend as an influencer, a social media influencer now by the name of Kai Cenat, started a riot basically by having a giveaway. He was posting on his social media account that he was giving away PlayStations, video systems. And so thousands of youth showed up in this park, and I don't know all the particulars, it doesn't matter, but it turned into a riot. And so that's a negative and dark outcome from a social media influencer. And these influencers, what's kind of weird is we've always been influenced by people in life, but before the internet, and maybe more appropriate, before social media, things like Facebook and Twitter. This guy was on Twitch, which I've never really even heard of. That's a gamer's social media platform. But there's Instagram now and TikTok and all kinds of social networks of people that connect people around the world. But we've always been influenced. I grew up, we were influenced by famous people, athletes. So Michael Jordan, wore Nikes and then his own brand, Air Jordans. So I wore Nikes, for example. Or maybe you were influenced by a country music singer and you liked their music, so you wore a cowboy hat like George Strait. Or maybe it was a movie star, and so you wanted to be like Tom Cruise, so you wanted a motorcycle and aviator glasses. And so we've always been influenced. Or maybe it was closer to home. You wanted to be like your dad or your mom or your cousin or a classmate. And so influence is a kind of a natural order of things. And most of the time, as we grow and mature, we pay attention to good influences and bad influences, and we are taught to discern that. The problem now is that has expanded to just ordinary people. Anybody, whether they're talented or not, can be influencers. And sometimes they are connected with companies or products and just ordinary people that somehow have become famous online. So there's almost like it's not even real. And so again, sometimes it can be positive, and many times these turn negative. But one thing is for sure, we are all inundated with influencers, whether we know their names or not. And certainly our young people know their names and they're paying attention. So we kind of wanted to look at them and juxtapose current day social media influencers and our past history as Methodists, and look at our circuit riders like Francis Asbury and see if we can't take the good from both, internalize it, and figure out how we can influence others in reference to our faith in Jesus the Christ. And so another way that we're going to do that is we're going to look at the Gospel of John this month, and we're going to look at 4 of the sayings of Jesus where he begins, I am. And so today's reading comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verses 12 through 20. Jesus spoke to the people again, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me won't walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Then the Pharisees said to him, because you are testifying about yourself, your testimony isn't valid. Jesus replied, even if I testify about myself, my testimony is true. Since I know where I came from and where I'm going, you don't know where I come from or where I'm going. You judge according to human standards, but I judge no one. Even if I do judge, my judgment is truthful because I am not alone. My judgments come from me and from the Father who sent me. In your law, it is written that the witness of 2 people is true. I am one witness concerning myself, and the Father who sent me is the other. Jesus answered, or they asked him, where is your Father? Jesus answered, you don't know me and you don't know my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. He spoke these words while he was teaching in the temple area known as the treasury. No one arrested him because his time hadn't yet come. And so this is our first I am saying that we begin with this series. I am the light of the world. We begin here because a couple things. Number one, this is a theme in the Gospel of John from the very beginning, this light versus darkness. Now, just the last month or two, a couple series ago, we looked at the Nicodemus story when Nicodemus came to Jesus in the darkness of night, and they had this very deep theological discussion about rebirth and being born again. Well, that was from the Gospel of John. But if we back up to the very beginning, the chapter 1, the prologue of this gospel, this beautiful gospel, it's right there as well. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. Everything came into being through the Word. And so establishing right from the beginning of this gospel who Jesus was. He's the Word of God, and he's been there with God, in God, the whole time. But interestingly enough, it comes on to say, what came into being through the Word was life. And the life was the light for all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't extinguish the light. Beautiful words to begin this gospel. And then all the way through to the end of the gospel, this is a recurring theme. This juxtaposition between darkness and light. We get it in our reading today. We get it into the beginning of this gospel, and it's something to really consider. I like how the Pharisees push back a little bit. They say, because you're testifying about yourself, your testimony isn't valid. So what the Pharisees didn't like about this statement, we value. And so when we're talking about making an influence, an impact on someone else, or making an impact in the world, influencing others, that's exactly why we wanted to start with the words of Jesus. Jesus himself tells us who he is. And we're going to look at 4 of those. And so why not start with that, what Jesus says about himself? And he says, I am the light of the world. And if you want to walk in the light, follow me. It's just a simple, easy statement that we all can understand. We know exactly what it means to be in darkness. Have you ever walked into your room or an office space and flipped on the lights and you see all the mess that was left behind, probably by you or me, but maybe others, and you want to just flip the lights right back off and deal with it later, clean up that mess later? Well, that's exactly, what we're talking about here is that, when our life is in darkness, in essence, it's a mess. And so the clutter of sin, the mistakes that we make against God, against ourselves, against our neighbors, where we're hurting ourselves and others and our relationship with God, that's darkness. And Jesus came to be the light switch for all people. So not based on who we're born to or where we're born or how much we have or don't have. It's available to all. He's the light switch that we can flip on and own the mess and begin to allow God to clean us up through the blood of Jesus the Christ. And so that's why it's such an easy metaphor. We can miss it or we can discard it and want to go dive deep into some other conversations and move on in the scriptures. But no, it's that simple. And Jesus is the answer to our clutter, to our mess, to our own destruction that we've created around us, is to not hide from it. Don't flip the switch back off. Switch it on. Let the light of Christ shine on us and through us. Let us identify the areas that we need to work on. And then that becomes our testimony, what we can share with others. And it's the great way to be influencers on a world that's living in darkness. And you see those horrible images from New York City, and what it turned into was a riot, and things being thrown at police officers and fighting and rummaging and there were big pieces of plywood, easy for me to say, but just awful images, just darkness in the dark night of the soul of individuals that were involved in that. And those are familiar images. And so the world sometimes is a dark place. And we can either contribute to that, or we can help people see the light. And everything that we say and everything that we do, everything that we share does one or the other. It either contributes to the darkness or it sheds light where people can be able to see an alternative way. Now, we all might not be called to be Francis Asbury or Thomas Coke or any of the other circuit riders from the 18th and 19th centuries. Most of us are not going to pick up and get on a horse and go. For that matter, we're not going to get in a car or even be like Pastor Melissa and Pam and Catherine and Jamie and get on a plane and go to Africa to share life with others. We don't have to do those things if we're not called to do them, to share life and be an influence to others. Frankly, you can do it right from your own home. Now, I encourage you to get up and go out of these doors and out of your space, wherever you're viewing this, and share life out in the world with others. But we can do it just like those social media influencers, just like Kai Sennett. And, that was a negative way, but we can be positive influencers right from our own homes. Whatever you're viewing this on, if you share this message with others, or any other weekly NCCP Anywhere sermons, you can be an influence on others. You can pass this along. You can share positive biblical thoughts with others on your own right. And so it's easy as a click of the button on the internet, through email, through Twitter, through text, through Facebook, and turn those things that sometimes we think of in terms of negative connotations, turn it into a positive. And we can do it in an instance. Interestingly enough, we had shared some pictures and some of our thoughts of the time that we had, the good times that we had visiting Annika and watching her show, and some of the things that we did along the way, Pastor Melissa and I. We shared that on Facebook, the social media platform. And Susan Staywick, our friend here at the parish, and you see her husband Dave preach here on NCCP Anywhere many times, a couple times a month at least. She is in Europe. She's doing some touring of some European locations, and she's in Europe as we speak. She saw our post on Facebook, and in an instant, sent those screenshots of what she saw to her husband Dave in Capitol Hill. He's not on Facebook, but he got that email and he got the screenshot. And so just like that, he could see what we were experiencing through his wife, who was in a completely different country, halfway across the world. And the point of all that is that's just how it works, and how easy it is to be an influence, negatively, or in this case, positively. We all have that ability. And then if you're sitting there and say, well, yes, I'm watching this on the website, I don't want anything to do with social media. Fair enough. I understand. I get it. But you can still influence others through your actions and through your word. Whatever your technique may be, again, we can all be an influence. The world out there is waiting for you to make an impact. Everyone follows someone. Everyone of every age, whether it's a young person following Kai Sinnott or some other social media influencer, whether it's a young me following Michael Jordan in terms of what I wear and how I behave on and off the court. Everybody follows someone. And so we need to have the courage to be that guy, be that gal that others want to follow. Jesus says here in that scripture, here for us this week, whoever follows me won't walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And so share that with others, wherever, however, and whenever you can. We don't have to be Francis Asbury. We don't have to be the writer of John's Gospel. We don't have to be famous and ultra talented because people are just hungry to follow. And so go out there and be an influence. There's nothing more important and nothing more impactful than being an influence in the name of Jesus the Christ. Alls we had to know and alls we had to remember is our own story in terms of how the light of Christ shone on our own darkness. Alls we have to know is the impact it makes when someone decides to follow Jesus. And it tells us right here what happens. Just share your life with others. Online, in line, at the store, or any way possible. And let the Holy Spirit guide you, and let the Holy Spirit do the rest. Let's all commit to be an influencer today and every day. May God be with you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon here in the parish or on NCCP Anywhere. God bless.